Hey guys, hope you're doing well. We have a ton of new details about Shattered Space. This post from the official Starfield Twitter account just revealed a bunch of stuff, including new enemies, locations, and unlockable armor. Let's get into it. Okay, the thing I'm most excited about is the new Shattered Space armor. As far as I know, we've never seen this before. This is brand new concept art of an armor set that will be in Shattered Space. Although do let me know in the comments if I'm wrong about that. There is a lot of armor in Starfield, and this is new Varun armor. Here's what the existing Varun set in the base game looks like, and here's the new Varun set as modeled by some cosplayers at Gamescom. Very good job they did as well, and you'll almost certainly be able to loot this in Shattered Space for yourself. And let me draw your eyes towards the white symbol on the chest of this armor, which is in the shape of a snake's head. This is of course the symbol of the Varun, given they believe in a mythical being called the Great Serpent. And I love the fact that even the helmet represents a snake's head with this white bit down the bottom, resembling the fangs. Now, something interesting about this piece of art is the white ring around the logo. We have never seen the logo of the game framed like this, but the ring actually relates to the main plot of the DLC. The premise of Shattered Space essentially is that while exploring a derelict research hub, you come across a wormhole leading you to the Varun homeworld. So that's why there's a ring around the logo. It's a wormhole. But according to the new info Bethesda dropped in the tweet, you're not the only one who goes through this wormhole. They write, quote, "You haven't seen the last of Zealots, Spacers, or the Crimson Fleet. As you explore the planet, be on the lookout for those taking advantage of the situation," end quote. Now, this line doesn't sound like much, but it has massive implications. Up until now, the Varun homeworld has been a mystery. No one knew where it was. But now, it seems everybody knows. It's kind of like when everyone found out about the presence of Wakanda in the Marvel movies, and it seems everyone is heading there to, as Bethesda says, take advantage of the situation. That situation being the Varun capital, Dazra, having a giant vortex opening up as a result of them experimenting with grav drive technology, and lots of nightmarish creatures called vortex horrors spilling out. So while all that's happening, all the enemies we know and love from the base game, the Zealots, the Spacers, and the Crimson Fleet, we'll be seeing what they can get their hands on. Something tells me we might start to feel a bit sorry for the Varun in this DLC, like their capital is breaking down thanks to the Vortex and other factions are storming in, and it's all probably getting a bit much for them. So Shattered Space is definitely going to humanize the Varun just a little bit. But hold up, notice how Bethesda says Zealots, Spacers, or Crimson Fleet, not Zealots, Spacers, and Crimson Fleet. Now, this little word here could suggest we won't see all three factions chasing you through the wormhole. Maybe what factions you encounter depend on what choices you made along the way. So, for example, if you're friendly with the Crimson Fleet and you've done their faction questline, you won't see them on the Varun homeworld. After all, when you are friendly with the Crimson Fleet, they no longer become your enemies, so it might ruin some of the combat encounters if you just encountered a bunch of friendly Crimson Fleet pirates in this DLC. Personally though, I do hope we see all three because I really want to hear what every faction thinks of this place. There is going to be tons of new dialogue as all the factions step foot onto this weird planet for the first time, and the faction I want to hear most from is the Varun, who have never been back to their homeworld. To explain a bit about this, in Starfield lore, some members of House Varun are sent away to do a mission, and they're not allowed back until that mission is completed. Your companion Andrea is one of those people. She's never seen her home, so she's certainly going to have something to say. This is one companion who you will really want to take with you on this trip. And just a final thought on this, I think making it so the other factions are going to be joining you on the Varun homeworld is actually a smart move. This is because it justifies having all the weapons and the gear you're going to find there show up in the rest of the game. A few people are wondering if the new loot in Shattered Space is just going to be found solely on Varun Kai, but I think it's going to show up everywhere once you download the DLC. And the reason for that is the other factions will pillage it and take it with them out of the wormhole. So for instance, if there's a new shotgun that's introduced in Shattered Space, this will get added to the algorithm so you have a chance of finding one just like in a random chest outside of the DLC. But let's talk Shattered Space weapons now, and in the tweet Bethesda fleshed out the new grenades. They write that there are, quote, new grenades to craft that stem from organic material you gather, and it's gross. End quote. Now we already knew you could craft grenades, but what we didn't know is that they stem from organic material. So basically, you're crafting bio grenades. Maybe you'll have to hunt down dangerous alien creatures and harvest their organs to make a new type of explosive. Or maybe it's a bit more serene and you can just walk around picking toxic flowers and mushrooms to make grenades with. Although the latter wouldn't really count as gross as Bethesda described. That's not really a gross pastime. That's more kind of Animal Crossing-esque, which is why some people have started saying it might be similar to the urine grenades from Death Stranding, which, to be fair, do count as organic materials. In Death Stranding, if you didn't know, you can collect bodily fluids, so not just urine, but a bit of everything, and craft something called an EX grenade. When thrown, EX grenades cause enemies to flee. There's also a more powerful type of EX grenade in Death Stranding called an EX grenade number 2 that, as you might have guessed, is filled with excrement. Yes, it really is. And this has the opposite effect of the other EX grenade I mentioned and can be used to lure enemies closer. Quite why they would want to get closer to you when you've thrown that at them, I don't want to know. And speaking of bodily fluid grenades, another game, Assassin's Creed Revelations, had blood grenades that would cause crowds to panic and flee. This enabled you to have a fight with guards without hitting civilians. And I wouldn't be surprised if one or all of these new types of Starfield grenade have similar functionalities. So maybe we can use them to lure enemies closer or make them flee. But just how gross is Bethesda going to make them? That's what I want to know. I hope incredibly. At the very least, imagine how satisfying it would be to smack someone over the head with an explosive full of urine. Moving on to maybe the biggest detail in Bethesda's entire tweet, the 50 new locations. They write, quote, over 50 new locations to discover and explore across Vurun Kai. End quote. We already knew this, of course, as I covered this in a previous video, but what I want to do is speculate a bit more about what these locations will be. The highest likelihood is that anything with a travel marker is something Bethesda counts as a distinct location. So when you're walking around a city and it says location discovered, that's about the size of the place Bethesda counts as a location. This can be anything from a coffee shop to a library to a military barracks. But what I like here in Bethesda's tweet is the word new. We're not just getting the same buildings and areas all over again, but entirely fresh ones. 50 to be precise, and to be honest, that's the only possible scenario I can think of. I really don't think they're going to be reusing any assets here. I mean, you're heading through a strange wormhole to an area of space undiscovered by anyone, so you're not exactly going to expect to find a Terra Brew. Bethesda also says these locations are across Vurun Kai, not just in Dazra, which is massively exciting, and it's for this one reason. It suggests they're rolling some fresh locations into the procedural generation pool. It's not like the DLC consists of just one city, but an entire planet's worth of content, with new locations to discover across this planet. Even if we're lowering our expectations and we got just about 10 new points of interest to find out in the world, that would add on loads of hours onto the game. And I really hope that happens. I've got no proof of that. It's all speculation, as I say, but that would be amazing. But enough about the optimism. Let's talk the possible downsides of Shattered Space. Over on the Starfield subreddit, a lot of good points and reasonable points are being made. The poster Mokochi writes, for a DLC coming over a year after the original release, the key bullet points being craftable grenades, 2 new enemies, and an assurance that the same factions of the base game have been shoehorned in is just weird, end quote. To be fair, they do raise a good point, especially when compared to another recent sandbox space games DLC, No Man's Sky, which is getting an extensive fishing update called Aquarius. This is just months after the last one which was only about 2 months ago. And then before that, No Man's Sky's survival expansion Adrift came out just 2 months before that. Whereas Shattered Space is something we've been waiting a year for, so you might be thinking, okay, I was expecting a bit more. But to make a counterpoint to this point from what I've seen, they've completely failed to mention the new city in their point, and this is dense with quests and locations, and that's really the headline of the DLC. It's not just a few new grenades and some new enemies, they're the bonuses. The main attraction is the city of Dazara, completely handcrafted and open to explore. And let's not forget the quality of life improvements that are also coming in this DLC. Things Bethesda didn't mention in their tweet. Bethesda's lead creative producer, Tim Lamb, told the website Gaming Boulevard in an interview that Shattered Space will also, quote, introduce new ship customization options which allow players to tailor their vessels to their playstyle, as well as new tools and gadgets that will help players interact with the environment in deeper, more meaningful ways, end quote. All this sounds massively exciting and is either coming directly packaged in Shattered Space or in a free update around a similar time. Another subreddit user called Dillvibes writes, I was really hoping to see some mention of fixing a lot of stuff in the base game instead of just building more on top of the cracking foundation, end quote. And that is a great point, because adding new content only distracts from Starfield's problems. It doesn't fix them. For instance, there are still quests that are bugged, preventing people from finishing them, and just going down Bethesda's tweets, most of the replies to them are people asking them to fix bugged quests. But to be honest, adding more content is all Starfield can really do. The biggest problems with the game are inherently built in, like it's too big and empty, and generally it feels like there's not much of a purpose to what you're doing. Bethesda can't exactly remove 900 planets to make the game more focused, nor can they create hundreds of unique locations to fill out the universe, because that would take years. So this is not a problem that's going to be fixed with DLC. Another problem with the game is generally average writing, and this pales in comparison to something like Baldur's Gate 3, or even past Bethesda games like the Fallout series. There's nothing they can do about that either. They can't go and rewrite the entire game, so my point is it's too late to actually fix the inherent problems with Starfield. So distracting from them with hours of new content like Shattered Space and the new rover, for instance, isn't quite such a bad option. The biggest problem for me with Shattered Space, however, is summed up well in this post by Shotgun Frog. They write, quote, I'm personally just annoyed they've completely thrown out the more grounded aesthetic of the base game. I don't mind them adding some fantastical stuff in general, but it's like they ramped it up by 1,000 in the DLC. So now we're going to have this semi-grounded base game with some fantasy space-time ghost world. I don't know, it just doesn't click well with me personally. Wish they fleshed out the systems of the base game with handcrafted stuff, end quote. And this is a great point. The whole draw of Starfield is to have this grounded sci-fi game set in a recognizable future. That was Bethesda's whole marketing. I have the word NASA punk seared into my brain now thanks to Bethesda, and now in Shattered Space we head to an alien planet through a wormhole and have to fight giant blue spiders. I mean, it goes against the appeal of Starfield. Or at least that's how I felt when I first saw the trailer. But then I thought about it for a second. I thought, you know what? I've had 500 hours of grounded Starfield sci-fi stuff. Let's leave the NASA punk stuff to one side and get a little weird. It's kind of like going on a holiday It's kind of like going on holiday to somewhere strange and inexplicable like the jungle or the Isle of Wight. And I'm all for it, because I remember feeling the same about the Oblivion expansion Shivering Isles at the time that came out all those years ago. And I was thinking, it's too weird, I like my green forest and my rolling hills. Then I was like, no, come on, let's try something different. Let's fight a faceless yellow man with a sword for an arm. Anyway, those were my thoughts on Shattered Space and what you're going to be playing in the DLC when it launches September 30th. But what about you? I would love to know your thoughts on this DLC. Let me know in the comments what you think, and then subscribe to the channel for more Starfield videos. Remember to head on over to patreon.com/gamingwithgriffgriffin and sponsor this channel as well.